Admiral Zephyros stood on the bridge of the massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion, watching the blue-green planet slowly rotate beneath them. Earth. Such a small, insignificant world that had somehow managed to irritate the entire Galactic Council with its constant warnings and protests. "Sir, the human delegation is requesting another audience," reported Communications Officer Thala, her forearms dancing across the control panels with practiced ease. "They're sending the same message on all frequencies." Zephyros let out a sound that resembled laughter, though his species had no concept of humor as humans understood it. The Valorian Admiral's crystalline exoskeleton gleamed under the bridge lights, each facet reflecting his contempt for the primitive species below. "Play it again," he commanded, settling his massive frame into the command chair, designed specifically for his towering 8-foot form. The view screen flickered to life, showing a tired-looking human woman in a simple blue uniform. Her name appeared beneath her image: Director Sarah Chen, Earth Defense Council. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept in days, and her voice carried a weight that spoke of desperate urgency. "This is our final warning to the 9th Armada of the Galactic Council. You are entering restricted space around Sol System. We have repeatedly explained that our star is unstable. A massive solar event is imminent. Your ships are in extreme danger. Please withdraw immediately. We do not wish harm upon anyone, but we cannot guarantee your safety if you remain in this system." The message ended, and the bridge fell silent except for the low hum of the ship's massive engines. Around Zephyros, his crew of various alien species exchanged glances that ranged from amusement to outright disdain. "Unstable star?" scoffed Chief Science Officer Kralak, his tentacles writhing with what passed for laughter among his people. "Our sensors show Sol burning as steadily as it has for billions of years. These humans think we're fools." "They're trying to trick us into leaving," added Tactical Officer Vex, her serpentine form coiled around her station, "probably planning some sort of surprise attack once we're gone. Typical human deception." Zephyros stood and walked to the massive viewing port that dominated the front of the bridge. Behind him, nearly 3,000 ships of the 9th Armada hung in space like a metal constellation. Each vessel represented the military might of dozens of different species, all united under the Galactic Council's banner. They had come to Earth not as conquerors, but as enforcers. For too long, humanity had defied Council authority. While other species had submitted to galactic law, humans insisted on maintaining their independence. They refused to hand over their advanced AI technology, declined to share their quantum drive research, and worst of all, they had the audacity to claim that other species were making mistakes in their expansion patterns. Just last month, human scientists had published a paper claiming that the Andromedan colonies were being established too close to an unstable nebula. They warned of gravitational anomalies that could collapse entire star systems. The Council had dismissed it as another human attempt to slow down galactic progress. Humans always seemed to think they knew better than species that had been traveling the stars for millennia. "Sir," Thala called out, "we're receiving priority transmissions from Council Command. They want confirmation that the human problem is being resolved." Zephyros nodded grimly. The orders had been clear. Humanity had been given multiple chances to join the galactic community properly. They had refused. Now the Council had decided that Earth would serve as an example to other stubborn species. The planet would be stripped of its resources, its population relocated to work camps on mining worlds. It was harsh, but necessary for galactic unity. "Send word to all ship commanders," Zephyros ordered. "Operation Human Correction begins at dawn. Earth time. Disable their orbital platforms first, then begin landing operations. Remind them that we want the major population centers intact. These humans will be much more useful as workers than as martyrs." As the orders went out across the fleet, the Admiral couldn't help but feel a twinge of something he didn't quite recognize. The humans had fought bravely in their brief conflicts with other species. Their ships were outdated and their weapons primitive, but their crews showed remarkable courage and ingenuity. It almost seemed wasteful to break such spirit. But orders were orders. Hours passed as the massive Armada moved into position around Earth. The planet's defense satellites were pitiful by galactic standards, maybe 40 platforms with weapons that could barely dent a modern ship's shields. Their space navy consisted of perhaps 200 vessels, most of them converted cargo ships with missile pods bolted to their hulls. It would be a slaughter, not a battle. "Admiral!" Science Officer Kralak called out, his voice carrying an odd note of uncertainty. "I'm detecting some unusual readings from the star." "What kind of readings?" Zephyros asked, though he didn't turn away from the tactical displays showing his fleet's positioning. "Magnetic field fluctuations, unusual corona activity, solar wind patterns are chaotic." Kralak's tentacles moved rapidly over his instruments. "Sir, these readings are unlike anything in our stellar databases. The humans planted false data in their transmission buoys," Tactical Officer Vex suggested. "They're trying to make us think their warnings were real." But Kralak's confusion was genuine. As one of the galaxy's most respected stellar scientists, he had studied thousands of stars across dozens of systems. What he was seeing from Sol didn't match any known stellar behavior patterns. "Sir, I recommend we pull back to a safer distance," Kralak said carefully. "Just as a precaution." The bridge fell silent. Around them, the crew stared at their science officer in disbelief. The idea that humans might actually know something about stellar mechanics that the galaxy's greatest minds had missed was absurd. "Science officer," Zephyros said slowly, his voice carrying a warning tone, "are you suggesting that these primitive humans understand their own star better than the combined knowledge of 50 advanced civilizations?" Kralak's tentacles drooped slightly. "No, sir, of course not. I just think—" "You think too much," the Admiral cut him off. "The humans are desperate. They'll say anything to try to save themselves. Maintain current positions." Down on Earth's surface, Director Chen stood in the emergency command center buried beneath the Rockies. Around her, dozens of technicians monitored screens showing the massive alien fleet taking positions throughout their solar system. The sight was terrifying and heartbreaking at the same time. "Ma'am, we're getting massive solar readings," reported Chief Scientist Dr. Marcus Webb, his hands shaking as he adjusted his instruments. "It's starting." Chen closed her eyes for a moment. They had tried everything. Diplomatic channels, direct communication, even broadcasting their stellar data on every frequency they could access. The aliens simply refused to listen. "How long?" she asked quietly. 6 hours. Maybe 8 if we're lucky." Webb's voice was barely a whisper. "The magnetic field lines are already beginning to destabilize. When they snap back into alignment—" He didn't need to finish. Everyone in the room knew what was coming. Their sun was about to unleash a coronal mass ejection, unlike anything recorded in human history. The electromagnetic pulse alone would fry every unshielded electronic system within 50 million miles. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the particle stream that would follow. Moving at nearly 30% the speed of light, it would turn anything in its path into superheated plasma. The aliens' energy shields, designed to deflect projectile weapons and standard ship-to-ship combat beams, would offer no protection against the raw fury of an angry star. "Send the warning again," Chen ordered. "All frequencies, all languages we have translations for." "Ma'am, they're not listening," pointed out communications specialist Jennifer Torres. "They think we're lying." "Send it anyway." The message went out across space one final time, directed at the massive alien fleet now surrounding their world. Ninth Armada, this is Earth Defense Council. We are detecting critical solar instability. Massive coronal mass ejection imminent. All ships must evacuate the inner system immediately. This is not a tactical deception. Your lives are in immediate danger. Please acknowledge and withdraw. Aboard the Eternal Dominion, the message was received and promptly deleted without being played to the crew. Admiral Zephyros had grown tired of human warnings. His attention was focused on the tactical displays showing his ships moving into final attack positions. "All ships report ready, sir," Tactical Officer Vex announced. "Orbital platforms are targeted. Major cities are marked for landing operations." "Excellent." Zephyros settled back in his command chair. "Begin the attack." Across space, 3,000 alien warships opened fire simultaneously. Earth's orbital defense platforms, already hopelessly outgunned, lasted less than 10 minutes. Explosions bloomed in Earth's sky like deadly flowers as humanity's first line of defense was systematically destroyed. On the surface, air raid sirens wailed across every major city. People who had lived their entire lives in peace suddenly found themselves watching alien ships descending through their atmosphere, energy weapons carving through their sky like burning swords. But in the emergency command center, Director Chen was watching a different display entirely. Dr. Webb stood beside her, his face pale as he monitored the readings from their solar observation satellites. "It's beginning," he whispered. "God help them all." 93 million miles away, the surface of Sol erupted in a fury that dwarfed every nuclear weapon humanity had ever built. Magnetic field lines that had been building pressure for months suddenly snapped back into alignment, launching billions of tons of charged particles into space at velocities that pushed the very limits of physics. The coronal mass ejection raced outward from the sun like the breath of an angry god, invisible to normal sensors but carrying enough energy to sterilize planets. Behind it came something even worse, a particle stream so dense and so fast that it would arrive at Earth's position in less than 4 hours. Aboard his flagship, Admiral Zephyros was savoring the sight of human cities burning when Science Officer Kralak suddenly screamed, "Admiral! Massive energy surge from the star! All ships must retreat immediately!" This time, there was no doubt in Kralak's voice. His instruments were showing readings so extreme that he initially thought his equipment had malfunctioned, but cross-referencing with other ships in the fleet confirmed the impossible truth. "What are you talking about?" Zephyros demanded. Kralak's tentacles were flying over his controls in pure panic. "Sir, the star has released a coronal mass ejection of unprecedented magnitude. Energy levels are off every scale we have. The electromagnetic pulse will reach us in 18 minutes. The bridge erupted in confused chatter as other officers tried to make sense of what their science officer was telling them. The idea that humans had actually been telling the truth was almost impossible to process. "That's impossible," Tactical Officer Vex insisted. "Our stellar cartographers mapped this system centuries ago. Sol is a stable, unremarkable star." "The mapping was done from a distance," Kralak shot back. "No one did close-range stellar analysis because there was no reason to. The humans live here. They study their star every day." Admiral Zephyros felt something cold settle in his stomach as he looked at the panicked expressions around his bridge. "What kind of damage are we looking at?" Kralak consulted his instruments with shaking tentacles. "Sir, the electromagnetic pulse will disable every unshielded system in the fleet. Our ships will be dead in space. But that's not the worst part." "Continue." "Behind the electromagnetic pulse is a particle stream moving at 90,000 kilometers per second. When it hits..." Kralak's voice failed him for a moment. "Sir, it will be like being caught in the beam of a stellar cannon. Nothing will survive." The terrible truth began to sink in across the bridge. 3,000 ships, over 2 million crew members from dozens of different species, all of them about to die because they had refused to listen to the primitive humans they had come to conquer. "How long until the particle stream reaches us?" Zephyros asked quietly. 3 hours and 47 minutes. "Can we evacuate the system in time?" Kralak ran the calculations quickly. "Not even close, sir. Our fastest ships might escape the inner system, but the majority of the fleet. Sir, we needed to start evacuating 6 hours ago." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's engines. Around them, the invasion of Earth continued as landing ships descended toward the planet's surface, their crews unaware that they were racing toward their own destruction. Admiral Zephyros stood slowly and walked to the main view screen. Earth hung before them, blue and beautiful and utterly doomed. In a few hours, the same stellar fury that would destroy the Ninth Armada would strip away the planet's atmosphere and boil its oceans. The humans had known this was coming, and they had tried to warn everyone. They had tried to save the very people who had come to destroy them. "Sir?" Tactical Officer Vex asked uncertainly. "Your orders?" Zephyros closed his eyes and thought about the millions of crew members under his command. Most of them had families waiting at home, children who would never see their parents again, all because of his arrogance. "Send immediate recall orders to all landing parties," he commanded. "Full fleet evacuation, maximum speed." "Sir, should we inform the crews why—" "Tell them the truth," Zephyros interrupted. "Tell them the humans were right." As emergency signals flashed across the fleet and evacuation procedures began, the Admiral remained at the view screen, watching Earth grow smaller as his ships desperately fled toward the outer system. Some might escape, many would not. The humans had tried to warn them. Even facing invasion and conquest, they had tried to save their enemies' lives. In 3 hours, the Galactic Council would learn what happened when you refused to listen to humanity's warnings. 6 months later, Admiral Zephyros stood in the observation deck of humanity's Deep Space Station Alpha, watching as the last of the rescued ships from his fleet prepared for departure. The particle storm had long since passed, and the solar system was once again safe for interstellar travel. The human orbital complex had become home to over 30,000 galactic citizens during those months. What had started as an emergency shelter had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history. The first truly integrated interspecies community, built not through conquest or treaty, but through shared survival and mutual respect. Quite a view, isn't it? Director Chen approached from behind, carrying 2 cups of something the humans called coffee. She had aged visibly during the crisis, but the exhaustion in her eyes had been replaced by something that looked like quiet satisfaction. Zephyros accepted the cup gratefully. His species didn't require caffeine, but he had developed a taste for the bitter human beverage during his extended stay. "I will miss this place," he admitted, looking out at Earth hanging blue and beautiful against the star field. "You don't have to leave, you know," Chen said quietly. "The offer to stay as our permanent diplomatic liaison stands." The Valorian admiral considered this. Over the past 6 months, he had learned more about humanity than the Galactic Council had discovered in decades of distant observation. The humans weren't just technologically innovative or strategically clever. They possessed something that most galactic civilizations had lost somewhere in their climb toward the stars: the ability to see former enemies as future friends. "I am honored by the offer," Zephyros replied, "but I have a duty to return to the Council. They need to hear what really happened here." Chen nodded understandingly. They had discussed this many times during his stay. The official council reports about the Ninth Armada incident were already spreading across the galaxy, but they bore little resemblance to the truth. According to council propaganda, the fleet had encountered an unexpected stellar anomaly and withdrawn to minimize casualties. Humanity's role in the rescue was being systematically minimized or omitted entirely. "What will you tell them?" Chen asked. Zephyros was quiet for a moment, thinking about everything he had witnessed during his time on the station. He had seen human engineers working alongside Glatharian technicians to repair alien ships with technologies they had never encountered before. He had watched human doctors treating wounded beings whose biology was completely different from their own, studying and adapting their medical techniques in real time. He had observed human children teaching alien refugees their games and songs, breaking down barriers that had existed between species for millennia. Most importantly, he had witnessed the human response when some of the rescued aliens had attempted to take over sections of the station by force. A group of Korthak warriors, unable to accept being dependent on inferior humans, had tried to seize control of the station's command center. The human security response had been swift, effective, and remarkably restrained. Instead of executing the conspirators or throwing them into space, the humans had simply isolated them in secure quarters and continued providing them with food and medical care. "I will tell them the truth," Zephyros said finally, "that humanity saved our lives, treated us with honor and dignity, and asked for nothing in return except that we learn to see them as equals." "And do you think they'll listen?" Zephyros's crystalline exoskeleton shifted colors slightly, a sign of deep thought among his people. "Some will, others will not. But the truth has a way of spreading, regardless of official policy." They were interrupted by an announcement echoing through the station. "Attention all personnel! The transport ship Galactic Unity is now boarding for departure to Council space. All passengers should report to Docking Bay 7. The ship that had come to retrieve the stranded fleet personnel was itself a symbol of the changes beginning to sweep through the galaxy. Instead of a purely Council vessel, it was a joint operation crewed by humans and aliens working together. The human captain, Maria Santos, had volunteered for the mission specifically to demonstrate that Earth's people were ready to take their place among the stars as equals, not subjects. "I should go," Zephyros said reluctantly. "The others are waiting." Chen walked with him toward the docking bays, passing through sections of the station that had been modified over the months to accommodate different species' needs. Environmental controls had been adjusted for beings who required different atmospheric compositions. Food production facilities had been expanded to synthesize nutrients for dozens of alien metabolisms. Recreation areas had been designed to accommodate everything from zero-gravity sports to meditation chambers. "Admiral," Chen said as they walked, "there's something I want to give you before you leave." She handed him a small data storage device, its surface inscribed with symbols from multiple galactic languages. "What is this?" "Complete records of everything that happened during the crisis and afterward. Sensor readings from the solar event, communications logs, medical reports, engineering specifications. Everything. Unedited and authenticated with quantum encryption that your people will recognize as tamper-proof." Zephyros stared at the device in amazement. "Chen, this represents everything your species learned about the stellar event. It's essentially a complete guide to solar science that could revolutionize galactic understanding of stellar mechanics." "Exactly. We're sharing it freely with the Council, because that's what civilized beings do. They share knowledge that can help others survive. The Council will want to know why you're giving this away instead of using it as a bargaining chip." Chen smiled. "Tell them it's because we're not interested in bargaining. We're interested in building something better." They reached the docking bay where the Galactic Unity waited. The ship was an impressive sight, its hull bearing both human and alien design elements. Through the viewports, Zephyros could see the mixed crew working together with an efficiency that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Captain Santos approached them, her human uniform bearing insignia that had been modified to include symbols of respect from multiple alien cultures. "Admiral Zephyros, we're ready for departure when you are." "Thank you, Captain." Zephyros turned back to Chen. "Director, I want you to know that this experience has changed me. changed all of us. We came here believing we were superior to humanity. We learned instead that superiority isn't about technology or military power. It's about the courage to do what's right even when it's difficult. Chen extended her hand in the human gesture of farewell that had become common throughout the station. Safe travels, Admiral. And remember, Earth will always be open to visitors who come in peace. As Zephyros boarded the transport ship, he reflected on the profound changes that were already beginning to ripple through galactic civilization. Word of humanity's actions had spread through unofficial channels despite Council attempts at suppression. Other species were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions about the official version of events. The Andromedan colonies that humans had warned about gravitational instabilities were experiencing exactly the problems human scientists had predicted. 3 systems had already been evacuated after the nebula began showing signs of collapse. The Council's dismissal of human warnings was starting to look less like wise caution and more like dangerous arrogance. Captain Santos joined him at an observation port as the ship departed from the station. "First time leaving Earth, Admiral?" "No," Zephyros replied, "but first time leaving as a friend instead of an invader." "How do you think the Council will react to your report?" Zephyros considered this carefully. "There will be 3 groups, Captain. The hardliners will reject everything and insist that humanity must still be conquered. They'll claim our testimony has been compromised by human manipulation. And the others? The moderates will want to negotiate from a position of strength. They'll offer humanity limited membership in the galactic community in exchange for access to their solar science and other technologies." Captain Santos waited for him to continue. "You said 3 groups. The 3rd group will be the smallest but most important. They'll be the ones who understand that humanity doesn't need our permission to be equals. They'll recognize that the galaxy needs to change its entire approach to interspecies relations." Through the viewport, they watched Earth shrink behind them as the ship accelerated toward the outer system. The planet looked so peaceful and welcoming that it was hard to believe it had nearly been the site of a massive conquest just months earlier. "Admiral," Captain Santos said quietly, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Do you regret coming here? I mean, if you could go back and change the Council's decision to send the 9th Armada..." Zephyros was quiet for a long time, thinking about all the lives that had been lost and all the lessons that had been learned. "Captain, I regret the invasion. I regret the deaths. I regret the months of arrogance and ignorance that led to this crisis." He paused, watching a human supply ship pass by their viewport, its crew visible through the bridge windows. "But I do not regret what I learned here. The galaxy is about to discover that there are other ways to build civilization besides conquest and submission. Your people have shown us a path toward something better." 3 weeks later, Zephyros stood before the full assembly of the Galactic Council, their vast chamber filled with representatives from over 100 species. The great dome above them displayed a star map showing the territories of Council space, with Earth marked as a small, insignificant dot on the very edge of explored territory. Council Prime Nexus, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, floated at the center of the chamber. Its voice resonated through the assembled delegates as it began the formal proceedings. "Admiral Zephyros of the Valorian Hegemony, you stand before this assembly to provide testimony regarding the events surrounding the 9th Armada incident in the Sol system. Do you swear to provide truthful and complete testimony?" "I do." "Present your report." Zephyros activated the holographic display system and began to tell the true story of humanity's first contact with galactic civilization. He showed them the sensor readings from Sol's coronal mass ejection. He displayed the human warnings that had been ignored and dismissed. He presented evidence of the evacuation routes and electromagnetic shielding specifications that had saved over 1 million Council citizens. As he spoke, The chamber grew increasingly restless. Delegates whispered among themselves in dozens of languages, their expressions ranging from disbelief to outrage to fascination. When he reached the part about humanity's offer of sanctuary for the stranded crews, Council Prime Nexus interrupted. "Are you claiming that these humans, after being invaded and bombed, offered assistance to their attackers?" "Not just assistance," Zephyros replied firmly. "They offered sanctuary, hospitality, and friendship. For 6 months, over 30,000 Council citizens lived on human facilities, eating human food, breathing human recycled air, and receiving human medical care. Not one of them was mistreated. Not one was used as a hostage or bargaining chip." He activated another display, showing images from the orbital station during the months of coexistence. The assembly fell silent as they watched humans and aliens working together, learning from each other, and building something unprecedented in galactic history. "Furthermore," Zephyros continued, "humanity has freely shared all their scientific data about stellar mechanics with the Council. This data has already proven invaluable in preventing the loss of 3 Andromedan colonies that were facing exactly the gravitational anomalies human scientists warned about months ago." The chamber erupted in heated discussion. Many delegates were clearly struggling to process the implications of what they were hearing. "Admiral," called out Delegate Vrax of the Korthak Empire, "are you suggesting that these humans are technologically superior to Council science?" "I'm suggesting that they are different," Zephyros replied. "While we have focused on expanding across the galaxy, they have focused on understanding their home system with unprecedented depth. While we have prioritized conquest and control, they have prioritized cooperation and mutual aid. They have achieved things we haven't because they approached problems differently than we do." "And you believe this makes them worthy of Council membership?" asked another delegate. Zephyros looked around the vast chamber at the hundreds of representatives from species that had been brought into galactic civilization through conquest, coercion, or careful negotiation. Then he thought about the humans he had lived alongside for 6 months, who had saved his people's lives and asked for nothing in return. "Council Prime," he said formally, "I believe the question is not whether humanity is worthy of joining our civilization. The question is whether our civilization is worthy of humanity." The chamber fell completely silent. "I recommend," Zephyros continued, "that the Council offer humanity a full partnership in galactic affairs, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails, not as subjects or junior members, but as equals, because that is what they have proven themselves to be." The debate that followed lasted for days. In the end, the vote was closer than many expected. The hardliners pushed for continued isolation or conquest. The moderates proposed various forms of limited membership. But a growing coalition of delegates, influenced by Zephyros's testimony and the mounting evidence of humanity's capabilities, voted for full partnership. When the final tally was announced, humanity had been voted into the Galactic Council as its newest full member by a margin of just 7 votes. 6 months later, Director Sarah Chen stood in the same council chamber, no longer as a desperate woman pleading for her world's survival, but as Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Council. The chamber had been modified to accommodate human physiology, just as it had been adapted over the centuries for dozens of other species. "Honored delegates," she began, addressing the assembly for the first time as a fellow member rather than a petitioner, "my first act as Earth's representative is to formally invite all Council species to participate in the first Galactic Conference on Stellar Science, to be held in orbit around Sol in 6 months' time." She activated a holographic display showing the planned conference facility, a massive space station built using both human and alien technology. "Together, we will study our star and share what we learn freely with all galactic civilizations. Because that is what partners do. They help each other understand the universe we all share." In the audience, Admiral Zephyros watched with quiet satisfaction as humanity took its first formal steps onto the galactic stage. The human ambassador spoke of cooperation and shared knowledge, just as her people had demonstrated during their first contact crisis. The galaxy was about to learn that there was more than one way to reach for the stars. And thanks to humanity's example, perhaps other species would remember that the ultimate goal was not conquest, but understanding. As Chen concluded her speech to enthusiastic applause from most of the assembly, the star map above them updated automatically. Earth was no longer marked as a small, insignificant dot on the edge of explored space. It was now marked as the capital of the newest member of galactic civilization, surrounded by the symbols of friendship and alliance that marked humanity as equals among the stars.